Hey guys, I hope you enjoy this week's sermon. If you're interested in getting connected here more at the sanctuary, you can visit us at our website at tscwest.org, or you can check us out on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, all of the things. I hope you enjoy this message.
Before I give you the answer, I want to show you some things from the text, okay? Because I want to take us through this journey. Now, if you remember that as we're stepping into Ruth 2, a quick recap. If you don't know or remember the story that was read even last week and now into this week, Naomi is an Israelite woman who left Bethlehem during a famine, and she went to a foreign country named Moab with her husband and her two sons, and it was in Moab where she buried all three of those men. She buried her husband, and she buried her two sons. She then comes home to Bethlehem, a widow, and she comes home with nothing. No husband, no sons, no income, no safety net. The only person who comes back with her is her daughter-in-law, Ruth, who obviously she's her daughter-in-law, so she's married to one of her sons, who herself became a widow. And oh, by the way, she's a Moabite, which means that a foreigner, an outsider. And it's exactly the kind of person that the law of the day was suspicious of. Two women, no men to provide for them, no status, no plan. All they had was just each other. Now, as we walk into Ruth chapter 2, I want to remind you, or at least want you to know, that this is not a success story, okay? This is not a story that if you were to just follow what Naomi and Ruth did, that all of a sudden you are going to get these riches, you're going to become Jeff Bezos, or you're going to become this incredible person that the Bible is going to write about, even though eventually what happens is that the Bible does write about Ruth and Naomi, and we're going to find out why today. So this is not a success story. This is two women that have hit rock bottom, trying to figure out how to eat. Man, I don't know about you, but that kind of sounds a little bit like some seasons of my own life. Hitting rock bottom and just trying to figure out, how am I going to provide for my family? And if we were honest, I think that there's a lot of people in this room even that are maybe even experiencing that today. And so chapter 2 begins with Ruth doing the only thing that is available to a poor widow in that culture to do. She goes out to glean. Now, I know a majority of you don't live in an agrarian society. Some of you may live on a farm here. Amazing. So let me explain. You see, Old Testament law required landowners to leave the edges of the fields unharvested. So if you were growing corn, you can harvest everything that is in the middle of that field, but everything that was along the edges and along the roads, law would require you to not harvest that. And it was so that the poor of the particular city or wherever your farm was found, they could come behind the reapers and they could pick up what was left or what was left behind. Now, this wasn't charity in the modern sense. What it was a built-in system for the vulnerable to be able to survive with a shred of dignity. This wasn't a handout, it was access to labor. That if you were willing, you would show up to the edges of this field and you were willing to work by picking up whatever was left behind, and then you can take that and go home and feed your family. So, as Ruth wakes up, she goes out looking to find favor in a field. Now, there's a few things that I want to point out. The first one is found in verse 3. So if you look at verse 3, it says, "So she went out, she entered a field, and began to glean behind the harvesters." And then it goes on to say, "As it turned out, she was working in a field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech." Now, I don't know if you caught what Scripture is doing here, but I want to really just kind of draw this out and magnify this for you, because that's my job this morning. My job this morning is for you to focus on this little phrase that the writer of Ruth wrote in there, and it is this phrase, "as it turned out." As it turned out, she was working in a field belonging to to Boaz. You see, that's how the book of Ruth all of a sudden is starting to talk about providence. It's casual, almost accidental, like nothing important is going on. You see, Ruth didn't know whose field she wandered into. All she was trying to do is survive the day. But this ordinary decision turned out to be the hinge on which the rest of the story swings. Now, I'm going to go ahead and immediately draw out an implication for your life and for my life here. How many decisions have you made in your life that as they turned out were bigger than what you expected? You were expecting a certain insignificant outcome, but it turned out that destiny spilled out. Or on the other side of the spectrum, maybe you were simply live every day in the ordinary and the mundane, and it doesn't seem significant. All you are doing is that you're pulling your own weight. And I think that if we were to stop and consider that this is really how the Christian life works. You see, God takes the ordinary, the mundane, and he shows up in the midst of it. God, and in Ruth, there's no burning bush, there's no parted sea, there's no fire from heaven, that as you continue to read the story, you are not going to find this miraculous thing that is happening. God is mentioned really in the way that people bless each other in his name constantly. But he never once intervenes in a visible way. He works entirely through weather, through famine, through deaths, through decisions about which field to work in, and a man who happens to own that field. You see, Ruth chapter 2, verse 3 is the hinge verse where the narrator hands you a coincidence in one hand, while with the other, he structures the entire book so that it's not just a coincidence. You see, I'm reminded of Paul in Acts 17 in this moment where he tells the Greek philosophers at the Areopagus, and I want to remind you of his words today, that God has marked out your appointed times in history and boundaries of your land. God did this so that you would seek him and perhaps reach out to him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. God is working daily and orchestrating your life in such a way that sometimes it seems as though it's just an ordinary day. Now, for Ruth, finding this field, as I've already said, was an act of survival. It's what maybe you and I would call just another Tuesday. Ordinary people doing ordinary things in the exact place that he has positioned you. It could be your commute, your workplace, the line at the grocery store, changing that diaper for the 1,000th time, deep cleaning your house. And I would argue that if you were to pay attention to what God is up to, you would see that the mundane and the boring are God's building blocks, honestly, for salvation and significance. Let me explain. You see, although Boaz in verse 1 is introduced as a man of standing, there's more to him that meets the eye. We didn't read the second part of this story, but we come to find out in verse 20 that Boaz is one of Naomi's and Ruth's kinsmen, or as the NIV would say, maybe even guardian redeemers. Now, Johnny, what's a guardian redeemer? I'm glad you asked. You see, a guardian redeemer or a kinsman redeemer had three specific jobs, okay? The first job, if a relative had to sell off the family's land to survive, the redeemer had the right and the responsibility to be able to buy it back so it stayed in the family. Number two, if a relative had fallen into debt so deep that they'd sold themselves into slavery, the redeemer could pay the price to buy them out of it. And number three, If a man died without a son, which is this situation that Naomi finds herself in, leaving his family line and inheritance in danger of vanishing entirely, a near relative could marry the widow so a child could be raised up to carry the dead man's name forward. These three things have the following in common. They are a near relative, they are able, and they are willing. Everybody say near relative, able, and willing. Now here's the interesting thing about Boaz. This was also just an ordinary day for him. He showed up to his field able and willing. But one of the things that he did is that he showed kindness, and he showed kindness to Ruth. But because he's a man of standing, this isn't abnormal for Boaz. This was who he was. And yet, spoiler alert, you ready for me to spoil the rest of the story? Was started out as a hopeless situation between two women who thought that they were on their way to extinction, turned into a genealogy of generations that led to the redemption of the whole world. Now, watch this. If Ruth hadn't gone to the field, she would have never married Boaz. And if she had never met Boaz, they would have never gotten married. And if they had never gotten married, they would have never had Obed. And if they never had Obed, Obed would have never had Jesse, who is the father of David. And if David have never been born, we would have never had Jesus. So here is God beginning to orchestrate and work in the ordinary, that he is not just a God of your today, but he takes your ordinary today and he becomes a God of generations. This is why genealogies are so important in the Bible, because what God is trying to remind you is that he's not just thinking about yesterday and everything that you did yesterday. He's not just thinking about what you are doing now. No. He has a purpose and a plan for your life in such a way where he's thinking generationally, and out of you, generations will come if you would just remain faithful. Ooh, I'm getting ahead of myself and excited, and I got to stop. What we see in Boaz is really a shadow of who we have in Jesus. See, John would tell us that Jesus is the Word who became flesh that dwelt among us. Now, you've heard that. We read that every single Christmas, Advent, and the Word became flesh and he dwelt among us. But if you really stop and consider, what is the language really doing? It literally means that Jesus moved in next door to you. Jesus moved into your neighborhood. Think about this. Think about the next time you are rolling your trash can out to the curb. At least in Dallas, that's what we do. I think you do it here too. But whatever happens, next time you are mowing your lawn and your neighbor walks by. The next time that you're rolling out your trash can and the trash man is coming by and you don't even pay attention. Or the next time that your kids are swinging outside or playing in the backyard or maybe in the front yard, or you are at a park near your house and you see people around you, just imagine that is Jesus who moved into the neighborhood. God taken on flesh, and he dwelt among us. He became a near relative. He was able and he was willing to redeem us from our desolation and our destitution and delivered us from our disease of sin and death. He gave us life again. He gave us purpose again. He gave meaning to our mundane and our ordinary. So this brings me back to my original question. How do you change the world? How do you change the world? Now, allow me to give you my answer. I want to submit to you that the way that you change the world is through faithful presence. Yes. Faithful presence. You see, it is imperative and honestly your prerogative to be attentive and fully present to the presence of God in your everyday, ordinary, and mundane moments of your life. So much so that you probably have this book in your house, but there's a book that was written and it's called Every Moment Holy. And if you don't have it, I recommend it, truly. It has prayers in there. And I'm telling you, there's times where I'm at home and I'm folding laundry and I'm like, I hate folding laundry, I really hate it. To the point where I'm folding laundry because I'm just being a good husband, and I'm reminded that there is a prayer in every moment holy about folding laundry. And one day, there's been a few times where I pulled that book out just to remind me that this moment is holy. And I can't tell you the times where the Lord has met me simply because I'm folding my son's underwear again, and I'm putting shirts on hangers. And as I'm praying this prayer, there have been moments where tears just begin to stream down my face because I realize God is here. So it's your prerogative to be attentive and faithfully present to the presence of God in your everyday and ordinary and mundane moments of your life, and faithfully present to those around you. You see, narrators of your life may say things like, it just so happened, but you must live with the conviction and the certainty that God is present and participating in the ordinary. This is it. You're not living a life of it just so happened. You are living a life where God, he doesn't usually change the world through spectacle. He changes it through ordinary people faithfully doing ordinary things in the exact place He's already positioned them so that they would seek Him and perhaps reach out to Him and find Him. That Paul would say that whatever you do work at it with all of your heart as working unto the Lord. You don't need a bigger platform to change the world. You need to notice who is actually in your field. Who's the coworker that nobody talks to at lunch? Who's the neighbor whose lawn hasn't been mowed because he's going through something you don't know about yet? Who's the person in your recovery group who came back this week even though last week was a disaster? You don't have to fix them. You don't have to have a program from them. You just have to be present and paying attention and willing to use whatever is in your hand. You see, I'm about to go a little bit off script, and I'm glad I brought my phone up here with me because we live in a society. Can I speak just pastorally real quick? Okay, here we go. We live in a society where we're just entitled. We think that there's a lot of things that people owe us. Now, Jonathan Haidt, in his book, The Anxious Generation, he calls the period between 2010 and 2015 the Great Rewiring. 2010 and 2015, the Great Rewiring. Now, let me take you through a timeline, and I wish I had a whiteboard. I even asked Derek if I could have it because I wasn't planning on doing this, and then all of a sudden it's like the Lord just like, hold this in your pocket. So I'm taking it out of my pocket now. Now, in 2003, some of you are like, I wasn't even born yet, but in 2003, does anybody know what was created in 2003? Not smartphones. Great question, or great answer. In 2003, the great MySpace was created. Now, in 2003, what started was really just kind of this big push where all of a sudden you are having to define your top 10 friends, and you were supposed to put them on your profile page, and those top 10 friends recognize that, man, you really think very highly of me if you're sharing with the world that I am in relationship with you. And God forbid that you remove them from those top 10. It happened to me. I removed a friend because I added my wife or my girlfriend at the time. Come on, bros. Anyway, MySpace was created 2004. Anybody? Facebook came on the scene. Okay. Now, what was the thing that social media was saying that if you could just be on MySpace and Facebook, this is what was going to happen to you. What was going to happen to you is that your social network all of a sudden would get bigger, and your notoriety would become even more so. And so we became entitled to think that all of a sudden our life was going to have significance because look at my friend count. And look who my top 10 friends are. and go look at their friend count because we're popular. Now, you can only access MySpace and Facebook at the time, around this time, on a computer. Anybody know what happened in 2007? Yeah. Steve Jobs gets up on the stage and he says, we have a revolutionary thing that we want to show you. And what he introduced at that time, dressed in the black turtleneck with jeans, is that, and I remember having, I was at work during his speech, and on one hand I had the Apple announcement, and on the other screen I had Apple's stock. And as I'm looking at both of those, I had told my friend, my coworker, I was like, let's put in $1,000, and he's like, no way, not doing that. And then all of a sudden, we saw that we could have tripled our money in 3 minutes whenever he introduced the iPhone. So in 2007, the iPhone was introduced. Now, I'm saying this because I'm trying to paint something for you. Jonathan Haidt calls this the Great Rewiring. In 2007, the iPhone was introduced. Anybody know what was launched in 2010? Huh? Instagram, yes. Instagram was launched. Now, there's something else that happened in 2010. So if Jonathan calls it 2010 through 2015, the Great Rewiring, something happened in 2010 that was also introduced besides Instagram. Anybody have any clue? Not TikTok, not the algorithm. Anybody? It was that very same year that iPhone introduced the, let me take a selfie, the forward-facing camera. And it was in that moment when the forward-facing camera was introduced that what followed really was kind of this 2012 moment where Facebook all of a sudden acquired Instagram, and what was created is all of a sudden I think they were the Chainsmokers made this song, selfie, #selfie, and the whole deal about the song was really just kind of let me take a selfie, because the selfie became this stalwart, this pillar within culture in the moment that became this picture of curation. Carefully curated lives that I'm going to post online and get you to think that my life is great and amazing, and look at everything that I have, and let me show you how great of a dad and a mom and a parent I am, and let me show you how amazing my kids are because they are now coloring at the age of 6 months. And the point is that the forward-facing camera became all about you or all about me and my world. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because one of the things about faithful presence is that we have ceased to become attentive to God's presence in our everyday life, and we have ceased to become attentive to other people because all we are concerned about is how people are going to view our own lives. It's the perception that people have of us. And what we can't do is that our mission all of a sudden, that where Jesus says, go and make disciples, you see, he's not just saying, he is, but he's not just saying that you must intentionally go out and go to the nations like this group that's going out to Panama. He's not just saying that, that's a part of it. But what the language is really trying to get at when he says, go and make disciples, is that he's saying, as you go on your way, as you are living your life, make disciples. Teach them how to be attentive to me, and teach them how to be attentive to others. Some of you said the way to change the world is through love. Yes, it's a life of sacrifice and a life of service. That is what Jesus calls us into. And what that requires is that we honestly take up our cross and we die daily. This isn't a gospel that is saying, oh, lovey-dovey and let me make much of you. No, Jesus is saying, make much of me. Because what he has come is that he has come to redeem you. He's the only one who is able. He's honestly the only one who is willing to be able to redeem you. And what Jesus calls us to is to die so that we can become more like him. And so this whole chapter of Ruth chapter 2, the one thing that I want to point out to you is that what was ordinary and mundane and what was really just an act of survival, God used all things for his good and for his purpose and for his will. And that is what he is doing for your life today. And so listen, I didn't come here to preach this incredible message that has deep revelation. I'm here to remind you. And the reminder is this: may you be faithfully present to what God has called you to. Listen, if church becomes a hobby, go find another one. This is boring if this is just a hobby. I mean that. You guys listen, I come from Dallas. There's nothing in Dallas. It's flat and there's concrete. You guys got mountains. If this was just a hobby for me, I'd be hiking in the mountains. Trust me, I'm from Dallas. I'd be out there. I'd be fly fishing. Catch me out there. But this is more than just a hobby. This is my very life for me. Jesus is everything to me. And I'm about to land the plane, so let me just end with this. That faithful presence means that you are attentive to God's presence, that he has come to live next door to you, and that you are attentive to others. The way that Boaz was attentive to Ruth. The way that Ruth was attentive then to Boaz. And what was created is this generational work that God began to do because two people decided that they were going to be faithful to where God had placed them. And so that is your challenge today. You know, there's a part of me that was a little happy. I don't know where they went, but I was a little happy when Derek was just like, hey, the kids, you know, they're going to be in service. And I was a little happy by that, because you know what that means? That means that now you get to be faithfully present for your children to see what you engage in on a Sunday morning. For you to be able to model that, because they're watching you. Listen, if you're every day and you're just kind of laying around, a house is a mess and all of that, and all you're doing is scrolling Instagram, their perception of what life is about is whatever's on this. But if what you are being faithful to is to care and to tend and to work at what God has called you to call, what they are going to get is a bigger perspective. John Tyson would say that when you deflect attention from yourself to Jesus, you're bearing witness before the powers that be that you cannot be bought. Your heart will remain steadfast, your resistance potent, and your vision glorious, because God is at war for the love of your heart. And if there's love in your heart for the Lord and for others, you will be able to engage toward one another for the sake of others, because Romans 12:10 says, be devoted to one another in love, honor one another above yourselves. Now, I like this verse, and I'll end with this. I like this verse because this is the only verse in the Bible that asks you to outdo one another in something. You want to outdo somebody, you want to be better than somebody at something. Be better at honoring others, is what Scripture says. Love one another with brotherly affection. Outdo one another in showing honor, because people are exhausted from having to perform and earn their way into community. So when someone welcomes you in love, or you welcome someone in love, hearts and humanity is restored. And so here's how we're going to respond this morning. I told you I didn't come with some deep revelation, but what I did come is as a reminder. And so I want you to take inventory now. Let's pause. Band, if you could come up, this would be awesome, a good time. But the question that I want to pose to you is, how weary is your soul? Or maybe for some of you in here, the question that should be asked of you is, where have you given up? And then I do believe it's funny, as we were praying and worship was ending, there's this word that was shared to me by Seth, and he's like, man, I just feel like there's this sense that God is wanting just to save in the room. And the question that he didn't know that I already had listed, and something that I sensed that God was going to do this morning, is to find the lost. Now, before that lands a certain way, at least sometimes it lands with me, but can I explain something to you about Scripture whenever it identifies people as lost? It's not a loss of dignity, but have you ever been truly lost? Man, that can be terrifying. That can be so terrifying. Because you realize that now you're alone and you don't know where to go. And so there might be some of you in here that are lost, and the relief that I'm here to provide for you if you are in this room and you feel lost is the same relief that you feel whenever you're lost and then all of a sudden, it doesn't matter who, but somebody shows up. If you're lost in here, I want to point something out to you. You can go back and you can do this. This is not part of my lesson. This is extra. Genesis chapter 3. That when Adam and Eve sinned, it says that they heard God walking in the cool of the day. And when they heard him, they hid themselves. And God didn't just keep walking in the cool of the day. What did he say? It's the first question that he asked man, and it's the question that continues to reverberate within your soul, and that is, where are you? Because God wasn't just walking in the cool of the day, he was looking for Adam. And he knew where Adam was, let's be honest. But you know what? Adam, on his own account and out of his own volition and out of his own strength, couldn't come out from hiding. And God, in his grace and in his mercy and in his incredible love, he came out and he went to look for Adam, seeking him out.
Come on.
Because he says, you're lost, but now I'm going to find you.
Amen.
And so this morning, how weary is your soul? Because Jesus is here willing to give you rest. He's proved himself for you. Where have you given up? Jesus is able to encourage you. Are you lost? Jesus can redeem you. I have this sense that all of those three questions, and as I was praying and my wife and I were praying for you guys before we came, she said something that was really pointed as she was praying. And she said this, I pray, God, that those that are in the room would recognize that I get this sense that they are being invited into a new race. This is a starting line. A starting line for a new redemption, a new hope that only Jesus can provide. And he's inviting you back into the story. What you thought was ordinary and mundane, God is saying, no. This is generational. And so if that's you, I want to invite, if there's a prayer team, ministry team, to come up. And I'm not going to pray for you. I'd love to if you ask, but I'm not going to pray for you. I want this ministry team to pray for you. You know why? Because they're the ones who are in your hood. They're the ones in your neighborhood. They're the ones that are going to see you every week. They're the ones that can come up to you and say, how's it going? I'm gonna be gone tomorrow morning. I'm gone. I won't be here as often as these individuals are, but these individuals are here to pray for you. And so if you're weary, if you've given up, if you're lost, God is inviting you into a new race. He's inviting you back into the story. Would you live out that story and be faithfully present to him and to others? Jesus, have your way.